Hello and welcome back to Downforce Debrief, where this week we are going to be discussing the MotoGP finale at Valencia and, of course, lots to discuss in F1 as well, despite it not being a race weekend. Quite a lot of news to go over. But for starting this week with MotoGP, as it was our only race weekend. So Phil is well, I imagine happy about this, but also sad about this, as it's going to be a bit of a lack of MotoGP from here on out because there's no more races. We have got a test that's happening today as we're recording this, actually, so that'll keep us busy for next week. But it's going to be a little bit less to talk about in the future. But yeah, I mean, I was going to say reasonably exciting finale. I think it was okay. I think Valencia maybe doesn't provide the best racing, perhaps in MotoGP, but it's certainly a bit of a different track at least. So that was interesting. But before we even got started, there was that weird incident between Franco Morbidelli and Aleix Espargaro, crashing before the lights even went out. I mean, has this ever happened before? I don't know. It was a bit of a weird one, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, nail-biting conclusion to the championship. Turns out Marc Marquez is the world champion this year, right down to the wire. Not having bothered to turn up for the last 5 rounds, he still wins it by I think 78 points. So yeah, we've had closer title fights in recent years, but yeah, Marquez nabs it from the comfort of his bed. And that Morbidelli incident, I don't know what's going on with Franco Morbidelli. Like, I don't know if there's another rider like him. For it to happen with Aleix Espargaro as well is just, as the youths would say, absolute cinema. Because he and Espargaro have got such bad blood over the years. And it was, I think what conveys just how bizarre an incident it was that Espargaro is a man who, having been cut up by Morbidelli in practice or quali, I think 2 seasons ago, his response was to ride up to him and hit him in his head, right? So they really don't like each other. And Espargaro afterwards, I was sort of expecting him to be like, this is why Morbidelli has no place in MotoGP. He can't even ride his bike onto the grid. It was dangerous for all involved. Instead, he was just like, felt a bit bad for him. It needs to be a bit more careful.
I thought he said, he needs to pay more attention. He needs to concentrate more. Yeah. Is that not what he said? There's been a few other incidents this season. So he did kind of say that, but not as harsh as you expected, maybe.
He seems quite kind about it, considering he basically just rode into the back of it. So if you didn't see the incident, it was as simple as the bikes were lining up on the grid. Espargaro hit his grid marker, pulled a bit of a stoppie, as any rider is entitled to generate a bit of temp in the brakes. It also helps the ride height device to kick in. And Morbidelli was just sort of weaving a bit aimlessly in the middle of the pack and clipped Espargaro's bike as he came to a stop, and then he lost his bike. He fell awkwardly and he fractured a bone in his hand. So he very, very ignominiously, he had to just sort of ride off back into the pits as his race was run before it even began. I think Espargaro is right. I think Morbidelli does need to just be a bit more careful. What a waste of all of that practice time and setting up the bike and qualifying. And he wasn't going to win the race, He might have picked up a few useful points and got a bit of, obviously screen time for all the VR46's sponsors. So I can't think of another incident similar to it.
I mean, more importantly, he fractured his hand and missed the relatively important post-season test. I mean, it's not as crucial as the pre-season test, but it's the first time that they get to try, the next year, early version of next year's chassis and stuff. So that was the bigger news for him, honestly, than missing the race. I'm surprised this doesn't happen more because obviously, it's not like F1 where they pretty much stay in order on the formation lap and all line up perfectly, and there's not really much that can go wrong outside of someone spinning or whatever on a formation lap. So MotoGP, they all go out of order. I think a few people like to drop to the back. I think Pecco's done that recently. I think Fabio Quartararo likes to drop to the back of the formation lap. So then they have to come through. What is it? It's 3 per row in MotoGP, isn't it? And also the rows aren't even perfectly lined up like they are in F1. So actually, if you look at the back or the front, indeed, of a MotoGP grid, the bikes look like they're sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 wide. Like it's quite a messy grid compared to F1. So you've got people weaving through and like you said, trying to activate the ride height device, so braking sharply at the end. Not all of them do it that way. I think Marc Marquez learned his lesson the hard way when he couldn't engage his properly. So he started engaging his early and then just started cruising to a stop, whereas others like to do it at the last possible moment and jam on the brakes and get the ride height device down at the very last second as they come into the grid box. But yeah, I mean, it's quite a sudden stop. So when people are weaving through the grid, I'm surprised it hasn't happened more, to be fair to Morbidelli. Obviously, a bit of a clumsy one, which you'd hope he would see coming. But the fact it's the first time, as far as I'm aware, this has happened since these ride height devices started getting introduced and people started doing stoppies to the grid. I really am surprised it hasn't happened before.
Do you know why I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often is actually on race starts, because we've seen some huge speed differential differences at race starts at the moment when people don't have the ride height device down, or when it was Marquez that hit his own visor, span up his rear tyre. Something similar happened with Jorge Martin, I think 2 years ago towards the end of the season. He just got a dodgy tyre, or the tyre might have spun on the rim as he was on race start. And, you know, there were bikes going by at that point, potentially like 50 to 100 kilometres an hour faster than you. I'm surprised that we haven't seen some much nastier incidents at stationary right in the first sort of 2-3 seconds of a race. And like that would be really, really nasty because everyone would just skittle. So that's extremely fortunate. But Morbidelli, I don't know. He needs to clean his leathers as well. He always looks, it just looks grubby.
He needs to clean his leathers.
Yeah, he always looks grubby because that weird gradient on the VR46 this year that's like fluoro yellow to white. Digi looks absolutely pristine and his leathers are always immaculate. Morbidelli just looks like he's like pulled him out of a skip and dragged him on and got on with the race. So that's my feedback.
Do you know off the top of your head how often is it every weekend they have a brand new set of leathers, or?
Yeah, I think it can depend from rider to rider. There's a bit of superstition involved. Obviously, if you crash in them and there's anything more than a bit of light scuffing, new set of leathers. Some might want new leathers each weekend. Some will get quite comfy and go multiple weekends. You know, like it's really hard leather, obviously, and if you get all the joints feeling good, then yeah, they might ride for a few race weekends like that.
Interesting. Okay, moving on then to, a bit more the race result, I suppose. We obviously saw Bez dominate the feature and in the end, Alex dominate the sprint. Wasn't the most exciting of races, I think that's fair to say. But it did eventually see Honda just about scrape through and lose some of their concessions. They've moved from Class D to Class C. So if you're not aware of MotoGP, I really like the system. We spoke about it previously as well. They have concession systems. So basically the worst performing teams get more freedoms, essentially. And the best performing teams get less freedoms, you know, things like less testing and less tyres and ability to use their race riders less engine changes, all these kind of things. And quite surprisingly, I guess it's a point of pride to not need the concessions, I suppose. But I was quite surprised to see Honda actually really keen to get rid of their concessions and really rooting for it and really celebrating it. And on one hand, it makes sense because, like I said, it's a source of pride. But on the other hand, it means they lose, you know, some of their freedoms. It means they're going to struggle to develop their bike a little bit. And I think that more rings true to what we said previously, or what in particular you said previously, Phil, that people are worried about Honda next year. The fact that they're celebrating getting rid of some of their freedoms means they probably think they've got a pretty decent bike ready to go for next year and they don't need the freedom so much. But I think some of the riders or something were saying, this is good because it means our team gets to rest more because we've got more testing restrictions. We can't test as much, which means the team gets to rest. And it's like, yeah, but no one's telling you have to do that amount of testing. Like, and equally, you know, you're Honda, you can have a separate test team maybe. I thought that I don't know. I just thought the celebrations around it were kind of odd. If it happens, it happens. But I feel like they shouldn't have almost been trying to get it, especially as all they needed was 7th and they only just got 7th. If they were 8th, they would still have those concessions. Is it half a year? Is it every half a year it's evaluated, or is it instant? I can't recall exactly. But did you find this a bit weird, or does it make perfect sense for you that they were celebrating losing these concessions?
I was a little bit surprised. For the sake of one track position, Luca Marini for the first half of the race was trundling around in 8th. Well, trundling's a bit harsh. Like 8th is a good ride for that Honda as it is at the moment. And for Marini, he managed to make an overtake and got himself up into 7th, and that was the difference between the team having 40 more sets of tyres next year, being able to do a full engine swap next year, and being able to use their race riders for tests. So I can only think what a lot of the riders say when they join those Japanese factory teams is that they do things in a really, really different way. Perhaps we're underestimating what a point of pride it is to move out of the concessions for HRC. Perhaps there's also a sponsor implication, particularly if they're working with Japanese sponsors who don't want to be necessarily associated with a team who need that help, that safety net of concessions to catch back up.
That's a really good point, yeah.
Maybe there's a more lucrative deal to be had with sponsors, because at the moment that bike is pretty barren, right? They lost the Repsol, the Repsol livery sort of slid out of view over the course of a few years. So when Marquez was on the bike, it was as it's looked for the last 20, 25 years. And then there was that sort of transitional year where Repsol was like, I'm down here now, and then gone. And now it looks like a test bike. It's very, very light on sponsors. So maybe in terms of attracting a new title sponsor equivalent to that Repsol placement, that has implications as well. Otherwise, it'd be quite tricky to communicate that to Luca Marini via the pit board is the other thing, because I guess it would have also, does it depend where, because Mia was in the points too. So how would you don't want to say, don't do that, Marini. You can't sort of tell him to tank with a pit box message. I don't know what you would say to tell him, definitely don't go any higher than 8th. So maybe it was just that he wasn't really aware. He was just riding his best race, and they couldn't really communicate the subtleties of that to him. But yeah, let's hope. I think it would be good to see Honda back on top. So let's hope it's just that they're really confident. It means that they get a cool sponsor on the bike next year or for 27, and all is well.
It's an interesting theory. I'm not sure I would necessarily liken it precisely to a title sponsor. You may well be right. But I think it is interesting that the riders say that the Japanese bikes have a very different culture and stuff. And obviously we've got a very Western culture here. So you're right. Maybe it's just pure pride. It's pure we don't want to be seen to be needing these concessions. We want to be on a level foot into Ducati and beat them with the same rule set. So they're maybe even almost against the concession system, and they're going to use it if it's available to them. But do you see what I mean? So maybe that's what it is. It is just pure pride. I can imagine that being a thing for these famous Japanese manufacturers that pride themselves on excellent engineering and stuff, which obviously have been off the pace for a few seasons. But I can't imagine Yamaha doing the same, though, despite also being Japanese, purely because they've got this V4 engine, which they've confirmed they're racing next season with all bikes. They can't afford to lose any engine freedoms for next season. They're going to be up against it to get this V4 up and running. And I still reckon they've developed that engine with a view to the 850cc 2027 season, ready to debore it, if that's the word, down to 850. So, there may even be a compromise year next year, but regardless, if the V4 is going to be the right format for 2027, they need to make sure that they're fully up to speed with V4 engines, just like the rest of the manufacturers are. So, yeah, interesting one. But just mentioning there as well, I want to bring up Jorge Martin, because he obviously came back this weekend after having many injuries this season. But interestingly, they pre-planned for him to only do 15 laps. The reason I thought of that is because you were talking about, how do they communicate that with Honda about losing the concessions, which I think would need to have been pre-planned. And that got me thinking, hang on, another pre-planned thing, Jorge Martin. Which, yeah, I thought was actually quite smart. I think there's two viewpoints. One is if he's not even going to finish the whole race, why is he racing? You should get someone else in, yada, yada, yada. But I think actually, look, he's been out of it so far this season. It's good for him, the outgoing world champion. It's good for him to be able to finish, well, not finish, but compete in the final race of the season. It's good for him to get a little bit of seat time, even if he wasn't able to finish. And of course, it's good knowledge to learn ahead of the test on Tuesday after the race. So I quite like this. I thought it was quite smart of them to pre-plan to pull him out, because they knew we were going to do the whole race distance, but to get a bit of seat time. What were your thoughts on Jorge planning to not do the whole race?
I think it made a lot of sense. First of all, he had a double long lap to serve. So if he hadn't have served it in that race, then it would be the first race of next season when, all things being well, he's back at full fitness. He's really in tune with the bike. He's got a shot at, a championship push, and he would start his season on the back foot by.
I didn't know that. So was that from the previous race he did months ago?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, well, yeah, quite a while ago. So the other thing is that medically he said he was fit enough to ride, but not fit enough to crash. So the risk for another serious injury if he'd have been riding on the limit or got tangled up with another rider he'd missed testing, obviously, and then he'd not only having endured a really awful season, then his post-season would be scuppered as well. His training would be affected, and psychologically that'd just be awful for him. So it wasn't worth the risk to get injured again. It's his collarbone. It's a worse injury than people thought, and that he thought. So he's just nursing that. And yeah, it's something. It's like a reason to wave at the fans, at his home fans after a really awful. Oh, nobody would wish the sort of season that Jorge Martinez had on their worst enemy. And he gets to sort of, at least I got back on the bike for the very last bit of the season. At least I have that understanding of where that Aprilia is. And I watched Bez go off and win. I know that bike is a race-winning bike and potentially a championship-winning bike. I'm 15 laps more familiar with it. I got to do a proper sign-off without injuring myself. And I don't have a double long lap to serve next year. So I think it was a really smart call. I hope he's back at the front next year. It's been a really weird season for like the bikes and the riders, just a massive power shift. Like since Marquez got injured, we've not seen that much red Ducati at the front for various reasons. We've also not seen
Wonder why.
the number one. Yeah, we've also not seen that number one bike hardly at all this season, and then the grid has been really mixed up for various reasons. And then we've seen people like Aleix Espargaro and Paul Espargaro coming, blast from the past back on the grid due to injuries. So just a really strange one this whole year, I think.
Yeah, I think it's indicative, isn't it, of MotoGP at the moment in general, with the Michelin tyres, I guess, sort of struggling, with the bikes being, pretty much as fast as they've ever been, with all the aero and all the ride height devices. And, it's not a coincidence, is it, that this seems to be one of the most injury-struck seasons ever. The riders have been warning of this. They have to push so damn hard these days to get the speed out of the bike. So you're more likely to crash, you're more likely to get injured. So yeah, there's been a lot of big names injured. So I mean, literally this season alone, just this season, we've had the reigning world champion injured for most of it, and then we've had what became the new champion out pretty much as soon as he became the new champion. Like that alone is like insane. Let alone everyone else has been injured. So yeah. I mean, it's an interesting one, and I'm wondering, well, I think this is your note, but I completely agree with the thought as to whether there has been a power shift among the manufacturers, because, was it last season? Last season was a bit of a weird one because GP23 was definitely off the pace, definitely season 4. It was clear you had to be on a Ducati to get anywhere near contending for wins or podiums for more than the odd race here and there, like per season. Like clearly, like, okay, we have had some races, in fact, Valencia was one of them, whereby most of the top, I don't know the exact results off the top of my head, but most of the top 4 or 5 were Ducatis. But there's been also a lot, we almost had, very nearly, no Ducati on the podium for the first time since, I think it was 2021, which is obviously just shows the power. Now, they did manage to get the podium, so the streak continues for now. But yeah, obviously we had Aprilia dominating. We've had KTM looking stronger. I mean, the commentators love to big up Pedro Costa and how much he's supposedly outriding that bike. But I think the KTM just genuinely has improved. I do think Costa's a good rider as well. But it is just a lot better than it was at the start of the season. We've got Honda coming back. I guess the question is Ducati's reign over? Or are they just going all in, developing both next year's bike and the year after, having discovered about a course way through the season they were clearly going to win all the championships that they care about? What do you reckon?
Firstly, I find moments like this in motorsport really disquieting and unsettling. I don't like it, Alex. It reminds me of when, like the 2009 season. Retrospectively, that was a great season, the Brawn fairy tale and everything. But I found it so weird that suddenly Ferrari and McLaren were like shuffled right down the order. And suddenly we were watching, it was Brawn, Red Bull and Toyota that were the first teams that had sorted out the blown rear diffuser. And I was just like, this doesn't feel like real F1 anymore. It feels like when you play too many seasons into an F1 video game and it's all got a bit scrambled up. MotoGP this season has had a bit of a feel like that because for the longest time, the best bikes to be on were the factory Honda and the factory Yamaha. And that was true for about 20 years. And it's only been 2021 onwards where the new status quo was that it was the factory Ducati, and the customer Ducatis were pretty close in tow. And I was just getting my head around that. And now I can't even really figure out the hierarchy. Some races Aprilia looks like clearly the best bike because we see not only Bez taking the win, but Raul Fernandez popping up and looking like, the second coming of Marc Marquez. Other races, one round ago at Portimao, Aprilia was nothing like as strong. The KTM, I've no idea how good that bike is because Acosta, the first half of the season, seemed to really struggle. Maverick Vinales was the lead KTM and is probably the closest to have won a race for KTM this whole season. It was back in Qatar, I think. It was when he had that tyre pressure penalty, but he really had the pace to go on and win that race. And it was only, I think he probably took a little bit too much out of his tyre. He didn't expect, obviously, to be at the front in clean air, and eventually fell foul of that tyre pressure penalty, and finished 14th after taking the time penalty. But for the first half of the season, it was only Vinales that could ride the KTM. The others, including Acosta, were in the doldrums. The second half, it was only been Acosta who can seem to ride it. Brad Binder, his stock has been so high his entire MotoGP career, and even as a junior, Binder's like a sort of Quartararo level rider who just hasn't quite had the chance to go on and prove it yet. He's been nowhere this season. It's so strange. So I just don't know what that means about the KTM. I'm to your point, I think it means that Acosta is a great rider who's figured something out. It probably also means that as the younger, more exciting rider, that KTM is trying to keep Acosta there. They're trying to keep his head from turning. So maybe they're putting a bit more weight behind his feedback and developing the bike specifically in his direction. But yeah, that seemed to be sort of the second, third best bike, certainly in Acosta's hands, if he could just learn to look after his tyres in Valencia. And then, the Ducati, I don't know. Digi's season has been like a sort of less severe version of Bagnaya's season. Some weekends he turns up and he's on it, he'll get a top 5. Some he's pretty invisible. Alex Marquez went backwards, took a bit too much out of his tyres. It looked like he might just sort of go off and gap Bez, but in the end he finished 6th behind his teammate Aldeguer. So I can't figure out where the hierarchy even is at this stage, and I don't know how much of it is because Marquez is missing and Bagnaia in a different way is also missing. So our benchmark is gone.
That's a good point. Yeah,
it feels like the substitute teachers are in, and it's just it's all a bit weird.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. That's a really good point. The fact that we've got, what we're talking about has been the dominant bike over many years, but the lead of that, the factory outfit of that bike, is currently just completely missing. I've got to mention Pecco. I'm sorry, but I've got to do it. 5 DNFs in a row now, and okay, all right. Valencia was not his fault. Very much not his fault. Absolutely wiped out. Who is it that wiped him out again? I've forgotten.
Johann Zarco.
Yeah, Zarco just completely got it wrong. Went deep. I mean, the biggest takeout you'll ever see in your life. All on Zarco, not on Pecco at all. Fine. I did find it quite funny, though, that Buliga outscored him this weekend because Pecco didn't score any points and Buliga managed to scrape 1 point in the feature, which was amazing. Obviously, season to forget for Pecco. Five DNFs in a row, a new record for him. He won't want to continue that into next season. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think it'd be interesting. Obviously, the best riders tend to end up on the best bikes in the best teams. You've obviously got that Ducati. I think despite how good Alex Marquez has been this season, unless we get another bad season next season for Pecco, you could probably still say that Pecco and Marc are probably the best 2 Ducati riders, and they're in that supposedly best team, but clearly something's gone a bit wrong there this season. Marc can ride the wheels off of anything, we know that, but Pecco clearly has struggled. So you're right. I think next season, hopefully we get both of those guys back firing on all cylinders and not injured. And then maybe we'll see a bit more of a return to the norm because, we're seeing I like that term, the substitute teachers in, which I think is muddying the picture a little bit. So, I'm excited for next season. If this end of the season is anything to go by, I'm excited for next season. There's also going to be eye to the 2027 rule changes, of course, so they're not going to develop that much next season. I'm excited for Alex Marquez to have the latest spec Ducati. I'm also quite excited to see the guys that have been on the GP24 this season, the other guys, be on a GP25. And we'll find out, is it a bit of a GP23? Is it a bit of a stinker? Or actually, are they going to go, yeah, it's pretty much the same. Also, what is the GP25 going to look like next year? Is it going to be a bit of a mix between the 24 and the 25? We don't know. There's quite a lot of unknown answers, which I'm quite excited for. The return of Honda as well. Are we going to see Honda genuinely back at the sharp end next season? Are they going to be ruining, celebrating the loss of those concessions? So lots of questions. I am really, really excited for next season. I think next week we'll talk a bit about the test that that's going on today as we're recording this. So we'll hopefully know a little bit more then. But of course, it's still so early. It's still such early days that we're not going to know too much. But with that, I think we move on to some F1. Now, of course, no race weekend this weekend for F1. But there's still lots to talk about. We've still got 3 more races to go in the championship running for F1. And the first one I want to talk about is going to be the next race weekend we've got coming up, and that's Las Vegas. And in particular, this early stage, Williams' livery for Las Vegas. Now, a lot of people were saying they love this. Oh, I love this livery. It's so nice, yada, yada, yada. More black and more blue? Really? What do you think of the livery, Phil?
I think it's going to be impossible to discern that livery from definitely the Alpine and probably 3 or 4 other cars when it's actually on the grid. It looks all right in a render, right? But it also looks pretty much identical to half the grid for the last 3 seasons. This trend of like naked carbon to save a few grams of weight has got absolutely out of control. Formula One cars, above all else, above being fast and easy to drive, should look really, really cool. And I think it's only Ferrari and maybe McLaren even McLaren are doing a little bit of the naked carbon thing. Only Ferrari's holding their end up of the bargain. It's a disaster. We need cooler looking cars. Just like bring some colours back. Even like really horrible garish ones. Even the horrible VR46 yellow to white gradient would be an improvement at the moment. Just
the sort of mucky looking gradient. You want that instead of this?
Yeah, Morbidelli leather grey would be better than this. Like, it's not a design problem. Like, I'm not having a go at whoever's laid out this arrangement of sponsors and colours. Like, it's not necessarily bad design. It's just there's a real like safe corporate homogenization to F1 liveries at the moment that makes them all look like sort of shareholder reports, and it's just a bit disappointing.
I mean, for me, I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it here. It's primarily black with sort of blue highlights. I think would be fair to say. Sort of lots of blue lines all over it, like highlighting like the front wing and the wheel guard and the sort of top of the chassis. The rear wings sort of blue and the side pods are blue, but everything else is black with just a bit of colour here and there, and the sponsor stuck all over it. It's, you know what, I do like it. I think it is a nice design, but I'm just so bored of black and blue. I think, look, if F1 had mostly pink liveries, like pretty much every car was pink, and a team comes out with a special livery and it's mainly pink, I'm also bored of that. So I'm like,
yeah,
guys, like they're all pink. Come on. It's a similar sort of vibe. It is a nice livery. It's just I'm just so bored of black. It's just so black, and they had the opportunity to do something really colourful. We have got a rule change next season, actually, in 2026. The teams have to use at least 55% paint on their cars. As always at F1, it's a rule effectively to save them from themselves. In theory, they could paint it black still, but if they're painting it anyway, they've got the weight, they may as well make it a colour. That's the idea. Honestly, I think it's not a direct response to this Williams livery, obviously, because the rule predates this, but it's almost a direct response to this livery going like, come on, guys, it's a special livery. You could do more than just mostly black, surely. So maybe it'll improve next season, but I agree. It's just F1 liveries have become so damn boring. But I don't want to talk about that anymore. I'm bored of it. But I do want to talk about another livery before we move on. And that's the Audi concept car, which also came out in the last week. I mean, there's a bit more paint on it, but I'm hoping that's not going to be their livery. For me, it almost feels like more of a colour, like a colour announcement, like a brand colour reveal than like a livery reveal. They've called it a concept. But like concepts, like if you look at like a road car concept, they're normally really cool, right? You go, oh, that's like a wild looking car. Like if the end car's anything like that, it's going to be insane. And obviously normally they're not. But is it a concept car? It's sort of a generic shaped 2026 F1 car with a few colours splashed on it in quite unimaginative fashion. What are your thoughts on this Audi concept car?
this is where we disagree a little bit because I thought it looked pretty good. I think it needs massive Audi rings on it and some cool title sponsor that I've heard of that isn't like a hedge fund or a suspicious like fossil fuel organization or anything like that. So like something that like makes drinks or planes or something like, that's the missing space at the moment. Those are Audi's racing colours. Unfortunately, there's a bit of like silver and black to it, which is part of the problem that you just spoke about. But I think the red edging around the air intakes looks pretty cool. It does look like an Audi. It just needs a little bit of like a garishness injection with a massive Audi badge running along the side or somewhere. Otherwise, there's not much they can do with it really. Like, when Toyota came into the sport, they already had like a ready-made livery from endurance cars, that really cool white and red. Bits of it were being torn off. It was really kinetic. In fact, we've probably lost a bit of that in F1 livery design in the last 20 years. Like the cars used to look like they were in motion when they were stationary because they were painted in such a way that it was like things were blistering off the sides of them. And I think probably in a bid to create more sponsor space and improve sponsor legibility, there's a bit less of that like stylistic component to a livery and a bit more blank colour to slap a sponsor on. So that's why the Audi looks a little bit underwhelming at the moment. There's still the scope for really creative sponsor placement. So the best thing about the Williams livery, one-off or otherwise, is that Duracell bit, using the top of the air intake to make it look like a Duracell battery. Whoever came up with that, they would have drawn that in CAD and they would have got their colleague over and be like, have a look at that. And they would be so pleased. They'd be like, we've done the best thing in Formula One for years. So there's a bit of room to still be really creative with how you use those sponsors and where. Also, like the Google Chrome logo on the hubcaps on the McLaren is another great example of that. But in general, we're probably in the era where people are just in favour of painting things a block colour so that you can slap a sponsor on it. I don't think I'm not worried about how cool the Audi will look at this stage, but let's see.
Yeah, I think it's just unimaginative. I think it is just like Audi's livery. I could literally do that in Microsoft Paint if I tried. Do you know what I mean? Like, take their colours. We know what they are. Take the Audi logo. Pick a couple of blocks. I do like the bit on the roll hoop and the front wing, the little red highlight. But it is just, all they've done is put a bit of red at the front of the openings, basically. That's all they've done. Like, it is very, very, very basic. And what's disappointing is right now is when they've got the freedom to design a really cool-looking livery. And I wonder if they almost didn't want to set expectations too high, because if they did, because of course right now there's no sponsors on it, right? It's just Audi's logo. So if they went wild and went, right, let's just make like the best livery that anyone's seen for the last 10 years, and went wild and made a beautiful livery out of their brand colours with no worry about sponsor limitations, everyone will be like, oh, their cars will be so cool. And then they come out next year and it's like, oh, it's like every other F1 car, because then suddenly you have all the sponsor limitations. That's potentially why they've come out with a relatively boring one, to set the bar low so that they can increase it next year. But yeah, you're right. F1 liveries used to be better. I think as these teams have grown into multi-billion pound corporations, I mean, I think Mercedes came out recently, it's worth something like 6 billion now, that team. Wow. Yeah, it's just become corporate. Corporate is the death of the world. Corporate is the worst. Profits and corporate image over all else. It kind of sucks, doesn't it? But anyway, that's enough talk about liveries. Let's move on to actually weirdly, no. First of all, let's talk about the championship running. I want to talk about the championship running because obviously we had Lando. Well, to be honest, dominate the last couple of races. Certainly, if you compare it to Piastri, but it's still on. There's 24 points between them as it stands right now. It does mean that even with 3 Grand Prix left plus a sprint race, that Lando can afford to finish P2 in all of those and still take the championship, even if Piastri wins every single race, including the sprint. So Lando's obviously in a good position, but we know that Max is strong. We know that sometimes Mercedes turns up and sometimes McLaren is maybe a little bit off the boil. I don't think it's very likely that both McLaren drivers, let alone one of them, could finish in the top 2 every single race for the rest of the season. I may be proven wrong on that one. But let's just take a theoretical example of that Piastri manages to win every race remaining. Okay, it's pretty damn unlikely on current form. But let's just say that. He wins all 3 Grand Prix and he wins the sprint race, because that is possible. As I said, if Lando finishes P2 in all those, he will win the championship. However, Lando only needs to slide down to P3 in one of the Grand Prix, just one of the Grand Prix, and then suddenly Piastri can win the championship. So it is still close if Piastri can sort his life out, to be honest, because he's obviously not been so good recently. So that's championship situation. I think effectively, if we get a Lando win in Vegas this weekend, it's pretty much game over, barring a catastrophic DNF. But I mean, even if Oscar runs him close and it's a great race, but Lando just about beats him out, Lando wins, Oscar P2, that's still a 7-point swing. The lead will then be up to 31 points with just 2 rounds to go. It's going to need a Lando DNF, and even then, Lando could still win it with a DNF. So I think if Lando wins this season, this weekend, it's basically championship over. But I mean, hopefully Oscar wins for all of our sakes. Imagine if this season ends up ending with Lando winning a race early. That's going to suck. So hopefully that doesn't happen, because I feel like even if you're a Lando fan, maybe not, but I feel like most people probably want Oscar to win this weekend just to keep it close. I mean, Max is obviously realistically out of contention now. So I mean, I guess the question to you, Phil, is: do you think any of that's likely? Can you see anything other than a Lando walkover for the rest of the season? Is Oscar got any real chance mathematically?
I think he does still have a chance, because so far this season, that fight between the two of them has been fought with the gloves on. Been very little,
true,
real aggression between them. It's been passive aggression over the team radio, and a lot of that championship fight has been fought over, team protocols. Who gets the pit stop first? Who cedes the position after, messing up a pit stop? Both drivers now are like, they can taste the potential championship win, so they will be going gloves off. If there's an opportunity to stuff one on the inside of each other, unless it means that their contract for next year gets torn up as a result, they will probably just go for it. They will probably ask for forgiveness rather than permission at this stage. And I think that makes it likely that at least at one of these races, both drivers will end up outside the podium. So that makes the maths, I'd say, favour Oscar a little bit more in some ways, right? Like the consistency is what's making it seem likely for Lando. If he just finishes on the podium each time and trundles along, then that makes it really difficult for Oscar to win. But suddenly, if there's a coming together, Lando finds himself, coming out of turn 1, way down the grid, and his race is compromised, and the best he can salvage is sort of P5, P6. And Piastri came out, the less worse for wear of the two of them. That can be, a potential massive championship swing. And this is the time of the season where that's the most likely to happen. Also, Max is racing around with absolutely nothing to lose. He knows that the two of them will be really trying to protect their cars. They've got a lot to, to lose when someone makes a move on them, so they're more likely to cede a position. So Max is just going to go for it. George Russell has had a really, really strong season, and tends to be quite strong in these last remaining races as well. He's not really got much to worry about. He's the golden boy at Mercedes. Antonelli is, in his place. So he's probably quite likely to stuff one up the inside of the McLarens too. So I agree that, mathematically, and the most likely scenario is that Lando will still hold on and win this championship. But I think it will be more exciting than it appears mathematically, because I think it's really unlikely that both McLarens will regularly turn up on the podium for these next 3 races.
It's a really interesting analysis, much more sort of a closer analysis and much more literal than my sort of theoretical mathematical analysis. Because you're right, I think it would depend whether Oscar's got it in him. So far this season, he hasn't shown the real, what people like to call the sort of champions mentality, where they'll ignore team orders and they'll go for a ridiculously aggressive move on their teammate and all these things. He hasn't shown that at all. All he's shown is he can moan over the radio. So Oscar, to me, has got nothing to lose. He knows he could literally have a perfect end to the season, win everything, and still lose the championship. So effectively, nothing to lose, you could argue. So he's got to go for it a little bit. So we need to see, has he got that dog in him? Has he got that hunger to just stuff it down the inside, as you say? Like on the start, I'm going to take this lead. If I'm P2, Lando's P1, I'm taking this lead. I'm going for it. I don't care if we come together. I don't care if I push him wide, if I end up with some damage. I'm going for this lead. That's what he's got to do. That's what he's got in front of him. Because I'd suggest it's pretty damn unlikely at this stage, not impossible, that, you know, they take each other out and then Max wins a championship. Because even if they take each other out in one of the races, Lando probably then goes on to win in the finale. So I'd suggest they don't need to worry too much about that at its face. But what I do think we need is we do need some of this sort of spice that you're talking about. I just really hope we don't get, you know, Brazil was a bit weird because obviously Oscar had his issues, but I hope we don't get, you know, last couple of over same thing over the final 3 races where they just sort of perform as you'd expect. There's no real, other than mistakes from, you know, like we saw in Brazil from Piastri, but there's no real drama between the drivers. There's no, like you said, Max, nothing to lose. I'm going to send it on Lando. I just hope we get something. I hope it doesn't end up being a bit of a damp squid of a run-in. So fingers crossed something happens. And I do hope Oscar can find that, what people like to call champions mentality, and just go for it. Because can you imagine if he goes for it, turn 1 at Vegas, the walls are close, Lando ends up in the wall, Oscar, you know, ends up, even if he only ends up getting a podium, P3 after getting a penalty for it or something, but gains 15 points, suddenly we've only got a 9-point gap with 2 races to go. Hell yeah, sign me up for that. Even if Lando ends up winning it, and we know I want Oscar to win it, that sounds fantastic. If we just get Lando cruising to the title, that sucks. So hopefully Oscar can make something happen. But moving on to the next race then, in Qatar, because Pirelli have actually announced a 25-lap limit of all compounds of tyres in Qatar. So that's soft, medium and hard. Drivers are not allowed to do more than 25 laps on any of those tyres. And it's a 52-lap race. So that guarantees us a 2-stop strategy. Now, the reason I want to talk about this in particular is because it's another mandated 2-stop race, similar to what we had in Monaco earlier in the season, but done in a completely different way. One Monaco earlier in the season, I think, did they say they had to use all 3 compounds? Or I can't remember the exact rule, but basically they could potentially pit on lap 1 and 2 and then run to the end and be completely fine, or vice versa, pit on the very last lap, etc. That, of course, is not really possible at Qatar. Yes, okay, they could do a 25 lap stint, a 25 lap stint, and then a 2-lap stint, but realistically, you're probably not going to do that. So I'm quite interested to, I mean, the reason they've done it is because, you know, Qatar is so demanding on the tyres. The corner speeds are so ridiculous. The curbs are also quite aggressive. They've seen issues in the past with punctures and stuff, so they've mandated it on safety reasons. But as a pure accident, I'm quite excited to try this as almost a way to do mandatory 2-stops, to force the teams, hey, you know, don't just cruise around, protect your tyres, go for it. Use both stints. And I'm quite excited to see how it shakes out. It should also lessen McLaren's advantage a little bit. We know they've still got a little advantage on tyre wear. So yeah, I've got no idea what we're going to see. I don't know if you have, Phil, but I think this is going to be a really interesting test by pure accident on safety grounds from Pirelli. What do you think?
It seems like a much better way of doing it than in Monaco. I wonder, do you reckon it's a direct response to how bad the racing became in Monaco? They just thought, we can't impose this rule again. We need to find a different way of going about it. Because there was also a big sort of public backlash to that as well, wasn't there? So I wonder if they've just gone back to the drawing board and found a different way of basically ensuring the same thing happens, you know, ensuring the integrity of the tyres without making the race feel a bit farcical. I also wonder what that does with the championship. Like, is there going to be a really narrow optimum strategy that Lando and Oscar will sort of have to fight to convince the team to put them on? Or will
Oscar will have to do that. Lando will be put on it anyway. Oscar will have to deal with the hand-me-down strategy.
The lost property bin of strategies.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I don't know. Obviously, I'm not an F1 strategist, so I don't know what this really does to, you know, how an optimum strategy is formulated. But if it turns out that there's a window of, like, you know, 2 to 3 laps per stop, right, where it needs to happen then, otherwise you're really managing that tyre, or you're just really compromised on pace, then that could have an interesting knock on in that championship fight between those two. Maybe it even means they might end up, you know, stacking That I think that'd be quite dramatic. Probably won't come to that. But yeah, I've no idea what the implications are, what the reality of that will be. But I just hope that it makes for more interesting and sort of more meaningful racing than Qatar, than Monaco.
It's an interesting point. You're almost a conspiracy theory level there, like that Pirelli have gone, oh yeah, safety, and actually they just want to test the two-stop theory. I'm not sure I believe that, but it is interesting because they could have done a 26 lap minimum stint, which you can't tell me that one lap is that critical. That one lap is not going to make a difference. Then suddenly they can one stop. So maybe there is a little element there of, well, we think the tyres can't do 40 laps, so we want to set a maximum. But actually, what if we do it at 25 laps? Guarantee the two-stop. Because also, Pirelli are obviously a big part of this. Pirelli could make tyres that wear so quickly that it's impossible to do one-stops, which they, between a bit of a rock and a hard place in doing, because everyone moans at them either way. So maybe this is a way of Pirelli sort of, seeing what happens if they mandate the two-stop and stuff. So, yeah, it's interesting. Maybe there is a bit of a conspiracy there with the choosing just below the halfway point, maximum point for the tyres. So interesting one. But yeah, I just I should have spoken about this earlier actually when we were talking about Oscar Piastri. I've got the order of my notes wrong a little bit here, but I don't think you've heard of this. But basically, in Australia, there's a chain called Grilled, and they ran an offer when about half through the season. They started an offer when Oscar was doing unbelievably well, couldn't stop getting wins and podiums. Looking like he was cruising to the championship almost. And they based an offer that you get a free burger every time. I think it's a free burger or a cheaper burger. I think it's free every time Oscar Piastri gets a podium. And they've had to change that offer because ever since they introduced it, he stopped getting podiums. So they've now changed it. I think it's now just every time Oscar competes in a race or something stupid. Like they've really, really dumbed it down. So it's really embarrassing for this sort of, I guess, Australian pride promotion idea that this Aussie's doing so well and we're going to celebrate him every time he does well. We'll give you a free burger. And then it's just completely backfired. And they've had to almost tail between their legs, be like, okay, how about every time the Australian competes in an F1 race? Like, that's just not the same, is it? This is absolutely hilarious. I don't think you heard about this, did you? But it's so embarrassing.
I didn't, but to me, this is evidence that Big Burger has got to Piastri, and that's why his championship has fallen apart. Like, he obviously doesn't want to bankrupt his beloved, favourite burger chain. So it's like, listen, if I keep winning races, this lot are going to go under, and so he's taken out of sheer Aussie patriotism, taken the hit for him and declined to finish on the podium. I think that deserves a lot of credit. I think that's that's really big of him.
Quite incredibly, his last podium I just looked up was in Italy, the Italian Grand Prix, Monza, 7th of September. So it's now been what's that? Over 2 months. Coming up to 3 months, really, by the time we do the next race, that he hasn't had a podium despite still being in championship contention. And considering the first half of the season, I don't think anyone would have predicted that, to be honest, either of those McLaren drivers would go that long without a podium. So that just shows his unbelievable downfall. And obviously we had Lando win the last. I mean, Lando won the last two. He was on the podium in Kota. He was on the podium in Singapore. He, of course, neither of them were on the podium in Baku. So Baku was the last time that Lando was off the podium, and that was also in September. So I think it just sort of highlights the contrasting fortunes of those two. But yeah, anyway, there you go. Well, that's where we'll end it on that somewhat interesting talking point there. So anyway, enjoy your free burgers if you're in Australia, but that's a shame it can't because of your Aussie actually doing well, which as an Aussie fan, I am an Aussie fan, but as a Piastri fan, I'm also disappointed with it. But yeah, anyway, guys, that's it from us this week for Downforce Debrief. As I said, that is now the end of the MotoGP season. We'll, of course, continue talking about it in upcoming episodes. Next week will be about the test and anything that comes out of that. Then after that, we'll get a bit more creative with things to talk about. There's certainly, MotoGP's got a long history. There's lots to talk about, along with obviously any news that comes out during the off-season as well. But of course, we have got still 3 F1 races to go, starting with the Las Vegas Grand Prix coming up this weekend, where fingers crossed, as I said, something spicy happens. I want Oscar to go for it. I want him to go for an outrageous send, potentially damaging Lando's car. Just go for it. Go for it. You've got nothing to lose now, mate. 24 points back, 3 races to go. Come on. Give us a championship fight. Fingers crossed. Anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to follow if you haven't already. We'll catch you next week.